Hello everyone, Tactical Lich here. Today we are back to another Warpstone Cup Best of 3 and we have a replay, or more like a series of Best of 3 replays, straight from the tournament host himself. HBYY here playing as the Kislev, and the very first battle versus Stinger playing as the High Elves here. Now for the army builds here, HBYY going for a front line of armored Cossacks plus some Kislev warriors in the front line there, and then a second line of more expensive missiles. Streltsies, two of them supporting a Wolf Hordes who does have the pack trap net to pin down enemy movement. For the mobility support, a single unit of heavy war sleds for the armor piercing damage and a couple Griffin Legion, plus a single Mortem Beowulfs for their Darkblood tainted counter effect to deny the High Elves from any healing. On the other side of the battlefield, the High Elves, other than the Fireborn in the front line, they are going with a rather heavy infantry first line of formation here. Instead of staunch line of spears, still a rather staunch line of white lions of Trace, a second line of archers with light armor, one of them the talents of Torquelada for their flammable synergy alongside the fire damage from the Fireborn. Further back, another unit of spears to guard the rear and a single unit of Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower. There are also a couple units of War Lions of Trace for their anti-infantry armor piercing damage, really investing into that anti-armor component, most likely trying to deal with the armored front line and mobility of Kislev. Leading the army, a Lore Master of Hoeth coming in with Earthblood and Shim's Burning Gaze supporting an Archmage of Light. It seems that there's another Shim's Burning Gaze on the Archmage of Light, which is against the rule set because you can't bring duplicate spells, but let's see what happens here. Other than the spells of Shim's Burning Gaze, we also have a net of Ammentalk, both sides bringing in net to control enemy movement. Just as we finish the army builds, battle has started with White Lions charging straight for the Kislevites. Cossacks, the armored ones, are opening fire at the white lines of Trace, plus Akshina ambushers, the Wolf Hordes, are gonna unleash some non-armor piercing fire onto the war lines of Trace as well, doing some really good damage now. White Lions charging into the front line alongside the War Lions. A lot of lines in this battlefield here, really doing some good damage with their armor piercing. The White Lions and War Lions here took some damage, so an Earthblight here to heal them up. Kislev warriors have both armor piercing and anti-large, so they're doing some pretty good work in here against War Lions and White Lions. But on the far side here, two units of Griffin Legion slamming into the Eagle Club for knocking out the artillery, and the Fireborn will be counter-charging. Griffin Legion are forming up, probably going to wrap into this blob fight and trying to work down those Fireborn. At the same time, a devastating Blizzard spell, deleting an entire unit of White Lions of Trace. They were almost full health, but you can see the damage pushed them straight from 80% of HP down to 0, and they're seen off completely shattered away. The armored Cossacks will continue to fight on with their Blood effect, keeping them in the fight. While over here, the armored Cossacks have taken quite some damage due to the lack of spell support on this side here. War Lions and White Lions doing some pretty good damage against them, but the War Lions have taken a lot of damage so far. They are rather fragile themselves with their light armor, so they are easy to take damage in combat. On the far side, Fireborn managed to repel one of the Griffin Legion. The other one will be slamming into the rear of the spears, doing some really good impact damage, partially thanks to the Kislev warriors acting as an anvil, pinning down the spears in their place. Spears will be moving up trying to support, but let's see whether they can get into the fight in time with their rather slow speed. Heavy War Sleds continues to run through enemy units here as the Spears trying to chase down the Streltsies, so Heavy War Sleds might have to sacrifice themselves to distract the Spears. Though seems like the Spears are turning their gaze at the Wolf Hearts, who are busy shooting at the talents of Torquelada, routing the High Elf missiles. Another Blizzard spell here, though it seems like it is cast in the middle of armored Cossacks and are doing more friendly fire damage than against enemies. Oh wait, no, the Fireborn were in the fray here, and they were slowing down the Fireborn with the Blizzard spell, applying Frostbite to them and also dragging down some of their HP. Now the Mortem Beowulfs are going after the War Lions of Trace here, applying the Darkblood tainted effect. So if any Earthblood spells are cast in the vicinity, the War Lions will not be receiving any healing, just like this one here. Earthblood onto the War Lions, but their HP is not ticking up at all. However, because the Mortem Beowulfs are distracted by the War Lions, only attacking the War Lions, the rear charge from the Fireborn was not affected at all. Not a single hit from the Mortem Beowulfs landing onto the Fireborn, so the Fireborn received the healing without any issue. On the far side, their Streltsies have resecured themselves further at the back there, getting into a safe spot, now shooting at the spears from afar. Akshina and Bushes move away from the enemy melee infantry as well, so they'll be raining down shots onto the lightly armored spearmen. White Lions were pressuring the Streltsies, but the Griffin Legion is in the vicinity, slamming themselves into the White Lions of Trace and on the far side Ice Witch of Tempest, disrupting some of the Eagle Club for preventing them from getting back onto the artillery, and another Blizzard spell onto these blobbed up White Lions. Let's see this spell goes down. Definitely a spectacular visual effect. The rest of the army for the High Elves are kind of crumbling, falling apart as the Griffin Legion running over what tattered units left of the High Elf roster. The White Lions will be deleted by the Blizzard, and on the far side, the Fireborn will be chased off by the Griffin Legion. Now all that's left for High Elves are some White Lions, and they alone cannot deal with so many cavalry and missiles still on the battlefield. Now the Archmage of Light being pinned down by a pack trap from the Akshina and Busher, the point blank fire from the Streltsies and Wolf Hearts will delete her. So at this point, Stinger decided to throw in the towel, giving Human Boy the win. GG to both players for the first game here. Human Boy getting some really solid work done with the Griffin Legion, and the Akshina and Bushers plus the Streltsies did some good damage as well. But I really think the MVP in this game is the Ice Witch of Tempest, deleting multiple units with her multiple Tempest spells, the Blizzard casting onto the blobbed up High Elf units. Mortem Beowulf's also very key in denying some of the High Elf units healing, and in the end, the armor-piercing frontline just wasn't able to break through the armored Kossar frontline with the Kislevite warriors as well. And the War Lions, I like the pick here, but unfortunately, they are just not a great unit overall, taking damage way too easily, while the backline here, all these archers, are overwhelmed by the sheer number of the Kislevite frontline and the mobility flooding into the back line. So GG to both players, and unfortunately the Fireborn alone, despite doing some good damage, was not able to carry the game. Now let us move on to the second battle of the series. In the second game, Human Boy is going for the Ogre Kingdoms, while Stinger going for Beastmen. Beastmen definitely one of the stronger factions in the current meta, with how many tools they get from the various DLCs. Now let's just go into the army builds here, as Human Boy going for a front line of Nobblers mixed in with Trappers, one of them the Bogglers of Met Marshes. Not sure why he picked this unit in the map here, because, well, we're in a desert, and their special healing ability, the Water Birth, providing healing and also regenerate new combatant models when in water, only works in water. So, well, we're in a desert, no water whatsoever, and they're not getting any heals. I guess the poison helps, and the additional melee stats and leadership helps as well, but we shall see how useful it is in this current situation. For the rest of the army, a bunch of Saber-Tusk packs, 4 of them in fact, and then 4 Iron Guts scattered across the formation, 3 Ogre Bulls as well, just for additional bodies and a bit more of non-armor piercing damage, leading the army a Slaughter Master coming in with Lore of the Great Maul with only Brain Gobbler and Tooth Cracker. Tooth Cracker for the missile resistance, and perhaps to mitigate any incoming damage from Throwing Axes and Ungor Raiders, while Brain Gobbler, really good spell against low leadership factions like the Beastmen to rout off their chaff early. For the Beastmen army here, a front line of Ungor Herds, Ungor Spears, the Pestigors providing a very solid melee line, and then a ton of Ungor Raiders, backed up by Minotaurs, one of them with great weapons, the other Regiment of Renowned Butchers of Kalkengard. Mobility, Sandagors of Tinge, and regular Sandagors, 2 of each. And that's it for army builds. Now let's get the battle started, as the front line is already clashing. Nobblers charging into Ungor Spears, while Pestigors charging straight for the Nobbler Trappers. Nobbler Trappers could have done some good damage against them with their projectiles, but the Pestigors are in melee combat and hacking down the Ogre Chaff. Saber-Tusk packs charging in, hoping to work through their HP, while these guys are trying to sneak in to the back line of the Beastmen, trying to go through the gaps of the Beastmen formation, but some of them are stuck on the Pestigor unit as they are force pathing their way through the Beastmen. They're taking a bunch of unnecessary damage. Definitely a small mistake on Human Boy's side. More Saber-Tusk pack are charging into the front line, but honestly they should just go around and deal with the Ungor Raiders instead, and let the Ogre Bulls fight with the Nobbler support against Ungors. Iron Guts over here are surrounded by Butchers of Kalkengard and Ungor Spearmen Herds. Spears are not going to do a lot of damage to them, but the Butchers of Kalkengard and Minotaur's great weapons are in the fray, and they're hacking through the Iron Guts armor. A little bit of a Flock of Doom here, draining multiple units hit points away from the Ogre Kingdoms, while over here Ogre Bulls are trying to hold the flank. Iron Guts, no, these are just Ogre Bulls slamming into the back line as well, threatening the Angor Raiders. More Iron Guts are now intruding into the back line, pushing back the Angor Raider firepower, while the Ogre Bulls here are doing a flanking charge. The Ogre Kingdoms are getting a very good break on this side of the battlefield, routing multiple units. However, these are only chaff on the Beastmen side. The real meat of their battle is here. The Minotaurs with great weapons and Butchers of Kalkengard contains most of the killing power on this Beastmen build. The Iron Guts actually getting a very early Butcher heal, trying to sustain their HP, but unfortunately they have been routed already. The Tentacles are not gonna allow them to come back and will hunt them down with their speed and armor-piercing weapon damage. Whatever healing the Iron Guts got are just gonna get taken away once again by the Beastmen army. Slaughtermaster activating a Toothcracker cast, just giving additional armor and missile resistance to the nearby Ogre units, but I don't think that matters a lot right now because most of the units here for the Beastmen are armor piercing indeed. On the far side, Senegals of Tinge are trying to run down some of the Nobbler Trapper backline, but the Overwatch fire from all of these Nobbler actually worked through the HP of the Senegals of Tinge and pushed them off. Some Ogre Bulls regrouped on the far side alongside some Nobblers, and they might be coming in for a second round. Ogre Bulls now trying to run down what's left of the Beastmen missiles here, but the Pestigos are here to intercept, followed up with a Butchers of Kalkengard charging in, and the Ogre Bulls are going to have a hard time here. Iron Guts in the front line was desperately trying to pin down all these Beastmen assets, but a quick Doom and Darkness, nuking what little leadership left on the Ogre Bulls, and they'll be pursued to their death by the Beastmen units. Not that they're gonna survive this overwhelming force of Beastmen, but that is indeed forcing them to rout earlier. Another unit is gone for the Ogre Kingdoms, and the angry Beastmen horde moves on. On the far side, the Saber-Tusk Packs and Nobblers are chasing off some routed Ungors, trying to retrieve a bit more points for their army abilities. Meanwhile, Beastmen continues to push. Minotaurs with great weapons and Centaurs running through whatever's left of the Ogre Kingdom's resistances. Now the Nobblers are subjected to a devastating charge from all these Beastmen mobility. And if the Butchers of Kalkengard return, yeah, there they are, they can apply the Terror on their Regiment of Renown traits. Synergizing with Doom and Darkness, this will give the Beastmen a much easier time in breaking off the Ogre units. Senegals of Tinge charging in, but perhaps the Nobbler Trappers can drag them down with their point-blank missile fire. On the side there, Iron Guts are slamming into the Pestigos, but with all these armor-piercing damage from the Pestigos and Senegals of Tinge, they're gonna have a hard time staying in the fight. Iron Guts still fighting the good fight here. A little bit of a butcher to keep them topped up and staying in the battle. However, I don't know how long they're gonna tank the damage here. As soon as the butchers wears off, they might be in a tough spot, as the Minotaurs with great weapons and Butchers of Kalkengard both outclass them in terms of melee power, especially the armor piercing on these guys bypass their armor. And then a Doom and Darkness from Malagor the Dark Omen, debuffing these Iron Guts leadership. Sure, they're still relatively healthy, but because their leadership got forcefully dropped low by the Doom and Darkness debuff, they're actually terrified by the Butchers of Kalkengard, and that turned into a natural rout, perhaps? Yeah, their leadership is below 0. So they are absolutely annihilated by the pursuing Senegals and Butchers of Kalkengard. The rest of the Nobbler Trappers are not doing too hot as well. These guys are getting too close to each other, allowing Malagor to get a 2-for-1 Flock of Doom. Saber-Tusk Pack though getting some solid kills overall. Not a lot of valor because it's just killing chaff, but definitely a lot of solid kills. Now trying to kill off the rest of the Angor Raider back line. Nobbler Trappers are still trying their best to shoot with their projectiles here. And those throwing knives / scrap metal are doing some good damage to the unarmored Beastmen units, for example the Destroyers and the Minotaurs with great weapons. Iron Guns charging in, and coupled with some Saber-Tusk Packs fighting the good fight, applying Terror with the Massacre. Maybe they have a chance against the Minotaurs, but the problem is the Butchers of Kalkengard, who do have their own passive regeneration, who are still very much healthy, and none of their unit models have been lost. So yeah, I don't know how the Ogre Kingdoms can take down this solid Regiment of Renown. A little bit of Nobbler's Trap though activated by these Nobbler Trappers, slowing down the Butchers of Kalkengard, allowing the Bogglers and regular Nobbler Trappers to do some good damage via their missile poke. But the problem is that they just kind of move out of the fray, while the Senegals and Malagor himself are in the mix, shutting down those Nobbler Trappers. All that's left for Ogres really are just these tattered Nobbler Trappers, Nobblers, and a very much healthy Slaughtermaster. but the problem is that Slotmaster doesn't have that kind of melee power to carry the late game by himself. He is wrecking some Ungor Raiders, doing some nice damage overall, but there's nothing to help him to actually kill these Butchers of Kalkengard, who are still on full models. Yeah, this is gonna be rough for the Ogre Kingdoms. On the far side, the rest of the Noble Trappers have been routed, and yeah, Human Boy will be throwing in the towel. GG to both players, and seems like Stinger is pulling back 1 point in this best of 3 series, pushing us into a third game. Iron Guts serve no purpose in this matchup as their armor means very little against the Beastmen these days, because Beastmen are flooded with AP options. Zandagors have AP damage, Pestigors have AP damage, their best monsters, the Minotaurs with great weapons, and Butchers of Kalkengard both do AP damage. And don't forget about the throwing axes from the Zandagors for their skirmishing option. So the Iron Guts are vulnerable to virtually every main unit on the Beastmen roster, while they themselves, their AP is largely wasted on the lightly armored Beastmen roster. The rest of the army here, the Ogre Bulls, did pretty meh. Noble Trappers, as always, a very cost-efficient missile unit. And the Saber-Tusk packs, a couple of them chased off quite a few Beastmen units, gaining some points for their army abilities, but just not having that melee oomph to carry the game. Same for the Slotmaster with his rather non-meta spell. I would have loved to see more Brain Gobbler, but alas, a lot of spell casting were spent on the Toothcracker instead, which again, the armor doesn't really mean much against the Butchers and Zandagors. For the Beastmen army here, the double Minotaurs did really well, and the Zandagors, one of them, did a lot of damage. Same goes for this regular Centigors. Pestigors and the rest of the Ungor unit doesn't really do much in this battle, but yeah, mostly just the main monsters and mobility carrying the game for the Beastmen. Now with the first 2 battles done, let us move on to the third and final battle and see who wins this best of 3 series. Third and final battle, Human Boy going for his main faction Skaven, while Stinger going for the Kislev army. Kislevites, a very strong faction in the current meta, while Skavens in a more awkward spot, but in capable hands and with the right build can still be very powerful indeed. Now for the army builds here, Human Boy going for a front line of Skaven slaves, Climate Spears, second line of a ton of weapons teams actually, 4 Poison Wing Globadiers plus 2 more Warplock Jezeel surrounded by a ton of Red Ogres, 4 of them in fact, plus 2 more Wolf Rats with poison and some Night Runners with their skirmishing Shurikens, leading the army Ikiclaw on his Doom Wheel. And on the other side of the battlefield for the Kislevites, front line of Armored Corsairs backed up by regular Corsairs and Spear Corsairs. And then there are also some monstrous unit here, the Things in the Woods, and that's it for the main formation. For mobility, a ton of Griffin Legion and Kosovo Dervishes. The Griffin Legion do cause fear, so they can be very effective against the low leadership Skaven army. And Kosovo Dervishes, a cheap and cheerful light cavalry. Once they get into combat, they will stay there until the Bar Blood effect wears off. They can quickly maneuver into position and disrupt enemy missiles or mobility, and then temporarily become unbreakable to prolong their disruption. Leading the army, an Ice Witch of Tempest coming in with the Hailstorm, Bombardment, and Hawks of Misha for the discourage effect. So let's see if Human Boy can win it with his beloved Skaven, or if Kislev will once again dominate the tournament battles. Now, both sides are cautiously advancing, not really trying to rush forward, while the Skavens are kind of spreading out their formation a bit, trying to cover all sides with their Poison Wind Globes here. The Red Ogres are also readying themselves to counteract the Kislevite mobility, but there's a lot of Kislevite mobility. Dervishes already moving into the back line, and the Red Ogres might be leaving pretty big of a gap in the Skaven box, which can allow the Kosovo Dervishes to exploit their lack of defenses at the back. Anyways, Warlord Jezels opening fire onto the Armored Corsairs, working through their HP while they themselves being hit by Hawks of Misha. The leadership debuff is applied onto them, but there's nothing else to disrupt them right now, so they'll be holding for now. In frontline Griffin Legion, due to the lack of monstrous infantry, the Red Ogres are not really in place to counteract them, so they're just slamming into the poor Skaven slaves, and the Skaven slaves immediately routes due to the fear on these Griffin Legion. Globes in the Woods are opening fire at the Griffin Legion, doing some insane damage, actually half the unit gone. However, the rear of the formation for the Skavens are opened up and Kosovo dervishes are sticking themselves into melee combat. They might have made the ultimate sacrifice, the entire unit getting deleted by poison wind globes and pursuing Skavens, but they have managed to push off some of these poison winds. The left flank of Skaven is also falling apart, Things in the Woods and Griffin Legion pouring into the center of the Skaven box. One of the Warlord Giselles have been shut down, the other also not far away from routed. Yep. Just as I said that, they have been routed by the Kosovo dervishes, as the Red Ogres are too busy piling onto the flanks trying to stop the Griffin Legion from pouring in. The problem is that Skavens simply don't have enough melee bodies, with only 4 units of infantry chaff. They can't throw enough units at the enemy to stop them from advancing into the middle of their box, so inevitably some of the Kislevite cavalry got through and the weapons teams have been shut down when the Red Ogres are busy fighting something else at other places. And once the weapons teams start to rout, Kislev with their superior mobility would not allow them to return. Seeing that all his damage output is lost, Human Boy will be conceding this battle. GG to both players, and that shall be it for today's best of 3 series. The victory shall belong to Stingers with that one final win. The Griffin Legion here did really well, using the fear applied with their glorious charge to break off those flimsy leadership of the Skaven army, and then the Kosovite dervishes sacrificing themselves, being a very cost-efficient mobility. Even if they can't do that much damage, the fact that they can stick themselves in melee and decide not to rout with that Bar of Blood effect for almost half a minute means that they can just disrupt enemy missiles for a prolonged period of time, allowing the Kosovite dervishes, other Kosovite dervishes, and the armored Kossars plus the regular Kossars to close in and dish out the damage with the help of some Griffin Legion. As for the Skaven army, that decision to spread out the Skaven formation might have spelled their doom there, allowing too many weaknesses in the Skaven box for the Dervishes and Griffin Legion to exploit, and as a result, the Poison Wind Globadiers and the Giselles were not able to earn back their value before they themselves being routed away by enemy melee units. Only 4 units of Red Ogres and 4 units of Skaven melee infantry were not enough to stop the thundering charge of the Kislev heavy riders. And yeah, that's it for today's battle. I hope you all enjoy this best of 3. Congrats to Stingers for the win, and GG to both players for bringing us this fun best of 3 series. And on that note, we shall end this video. If you want to see more Total Warhammer multiplayer content, especially if you want to see more Warpstone Cup actions, I'll be casting more battles alongside other content creators like Human Boy Yes here himself, and some other ones like Dreaded Saurian and Tequila Sunset. So stay tuned on our channels and give us a subscription. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.